June 14, 1951, 6:47 a.m. 30 police officers surrounded Bumpy Johnson's office on Lenox Avenue. Guns drawn, warrants ready. Police Commissioner Stephen Kennedy was leading the raid himself. This was it. The biggest arrest in Harlem history. The end of Bumpy Johnson's empire. Kennedy kicked open the door. Bumpy was sitting at his desk, calm, like he'd been expecting them. Kennedy walked forward, service revolver aimed at Bumpy's chest. "Stand up, Johnson. You're under arrest." Bumpy didn't move. Instead, he reached for his desk drawer, every gun in the room cocked, every officer tensed, but Bumpy didn't pull out a weapon. He pulled out a photograph, slid it across the desk to Kennedy. And what he said next made the most powerful police chief in New York City go pale. "Your daughter's wedding. Beautiful ceremony. Would be a shame if the newspapers knew who paid for it." The raid ended. No arrests, no charges. And 3 weeks later, Stephen Kennedy quietly took early retirement. This is the story of how Bumpy Johnson turned the NYPD's biggest operation into their biggest embarrassment. To understand what happened that morning in 1951, you need to understand who Stephen Kennedy was. He wasn't just another cop. He was the NYPD's golden boy, Harvard-educated, war hero, rising star in law enforcement. He'd cleaned up corruption in Brooklyn. He'd dismantled 3 major gambling rings in the Bronx. And in 1950, he'd been promoted to police commissioner with one mission: destroy Bumpy Johnson. The mayor himself had given Kennedy the order. Harlem is out of control. The numbers racket is making millions while we get nothing. Bumpy Johnson has more power than the police in his own neighborhood. That's unacceptable. I want him arrested, prosecuted, and destroyed. Do whatever it takes. Kennedy took the mission personally. He'd grown up poor in the Bronx, worked his way up through merit. He believed in law and order. He believed in the system. And to him, Bumpy Johnson represented everything wrong with America. A criminal with power, a black man who refused to bow, a gangster who operated with impunity while good people suffered. So Kennedy spent 6 months building his case. He planted undercover officers in Harlem. He wiretapped Bumpy's known associates. He pressured witnesses. He studied Bumpy's operations, his schedule, his weaknesses. Kennedy was thorough, methodical. He wasn't going to make mistakes. By June 1951, Kennedy had what he needed: evidence of racketeering, witness testimony, financial records showing illegal gambling operations. And most importantly, Kennedy had convinced a judge to issue a no-knock warrant. That meant Kennedy could raid Bumpy's office without warning. No time for Bumpy to destroy evidence or escape. Kennedy assembled his team carefully. 30 officers, all hand-picked, all loyal, all clean. He couldn't risk corrupt cops tipping off Bumpy. The raid was scheduled for 6:45 a.m. on June 14th, early enough to catch Bumpy before he started his day, late enough that the streets would be empty. June 13th, the night before the raid, Kennedy held a briefing. He stood in front of his 30 officers with a map of Bumpy's office building behind him. "Gentlemen, tomorrow we make history. We're taking down the most powerful criminal in Harlem. I want this operation clean. By the book. No excessive force. No planted evidence. We don't need it. We have everything we need to put Johnson away for 20 years. The officers nodded. Some of them were excited. Some were nervous. Everyone knew Bumpy's reputation. He'd survived wars with the mob. He'd walked out of Alcatraz. He'd never been convicted of a major crime, despite decades of criminal activity. But Kennedy was confident. This time would be different. What Kennedy didn't know was that Bumpy Johnson had been expecting this raid for 3 months. Bumpy had informants everywhere. He knew about Kennedy's investigation. He knew about the undercover officers. He even knew about the no-knock warrant 48 hours before it was signed. Bumpy had eyes in the courthouse, ears in the police department, and sources Kennedy didn't even know existed. But Bumpy didn't run, didn't hide evidence, didn't change his routine. Instead, he prepared. Because Bumpy Johnson didn't survive 30 years in Harlem by running from fights. He survived by winning them. June 14th, 6:30 a.m. Bumpy Johnson arrived at his office on Lenox Avenue. He was alone. No bodyguards, no associates. He walked upstairs to his second-floor office, unlocked the door, sat down at his mahogany desk, and waited. At 6:47 a.m., he heard the footsteps. 30 men. Heavy boots on the stairs. He heard Kennedy's voice giving orders. Surround the building. Watch the fire escape. Nobody gets out. Then, the door exploded inward. Kennedy came through first, service revolver drawn. Behind him, 29 officers flooded the room. Guns pointed at Bumpy from every angle. Bumpy didn't flinch. He sat there, hands folded on his desk, looking at Kennedy with those calm, calculating eyes. "Stand up, Johnson. You're under arrest." No. Kennedy's voice was hard, triumphant. This was his moment, the arrest that would define his career. Bumpy looked around the room slowly, counted the officers, looked back at Kennedy. 30 men for one man. "I'm honored, Commissioner." Kennedy stepped forward. "You won't be making jokes when you're in Sing Sing. We have everything. The numbers operations, the policy banks, the witness testimony. You're done." Bumpy tilted his head slightly. "Is that right?" "Yes, that's right. And this time, there's no way out. No technicalities, no corrupt judges. I've made sure this case is airtight." Bumpy reached for his desk drawer. Every gun in the room rose. Every officer's finger tightened on their trigger. Kennedy raised his hand. "Wait. Let's see what he's going for. If it's a gun, shoot him." But Bumpy's hand came out holding a manila folder. He opened it slowly. Inside was a single photograph. He slid it across the desk to Kennedy. Kennedy looked down. His face changed. The color drained from his cheeks. His hand holding the revolver started shaking. What the officers didn't know, what nobody except Kennedy and Bumpy knew, was what that photograph showed. It was a wedding photo. Kennedy's daughter, Margaret, in a white dress. Beautiful ceremony at the Plaza Hotel 6 months ago. October 1950. Kennedy had been so proud. His daughter marrying a good man, a lawyer, upper-middle-class family. The wedding had cost $15,000, more than Kennedy made in 2 years. Kennedy had told everyone he'd been saving for years, told his wife he'd taken out a loan, told his daughter he wanted to give her the perfect day. But the truth was different. The truth was in the photograph Bumpy had just shown him. "Your daughter's wedding," Bumpy said quietly. "Beautiful ceremony. The Plaza Hotel, live orchestra, French champagne, imported flowers, must have cost a fortune." Kennedy's jaw tightened. He didn't speak. Couldn't speak. Bumpy continued, his voice conversational, but with an edge of steel underneath. "I particularly liked the ice sculpture. Swan, wasn't it? Very elegant. Catering was excellent too. Shrimp cocktail, prime rib, 7-tier cake. How do you know all this?" Kennedy's voice was barely a whisper. "Because I paid for it," Bumpy said simply. Kennedy's hand dropped to his side, the gun lowered. "No, that's impossible. I paid for my daughter's wedding." Bumpy opened the folder further. Inside were receipts, invoices, all marked paid and signed by vendors at the Plaza Hotel. But the name on the payments wasn't Stephen Kennedy. It was Continental Catering Services, one of Bumpy's front companies. "You thought you were negotiating with the Plaza directly," Bumpy explained. "You thought the manager gave you a special discount because he was a veteran like you. But that manager, Carlos Mendez, he works for me, has for 8 years. Bumpy pulled out another document, a detailed breakdown of the wedding costs, the real costs, $15,000 that Kennedy thought he was paying. But the actual bills sent to Continental Catering Services totaled $42,000. Bumpy had paid the difference, quietly, invisibly. "I made sure your daughter had the perfect wedding," Bumpy said. "Made sure every detail was flawless, made sure she'd remember it forever. And I made sure you never knew where the money really came from." "Why?" Kennedy's voice cracked. "Why would you do this?" Bumpy leaned back in his chair. "Because I knew this day would come. I knew eventually you'd try to take me down. You're ambitious, smart, dangerous, so I needed insurance." He gestured at the folder. "This is my insurance." Kennedy looked at the receipts, looked at the photograph, looked at the 30 officers watching this conversation, not understanding what was happening. "If I had known, if I had even suspected, I never would have accepted. I would have canceled the wedding." "I know," Bumpy said. "That's why I made sure you didn't know. See, Commissioner, the difference between you and me is that I planned 3 moves ahead. You were building a case against me for 6 months. I've been building a case against you for 6 years. Kennedy's hand tightened on his gun. You're saying I'm corrupt. I'm not corrupt. I didn't know about this money. That's exactly the problem, Bumpy said. You didn't know, which means you can't prove you're innocent. Think about how this looks. The police commissioner investigating me while I secretly pay for his daughter's extravagant wedding. To the press, to the public, to the district attorney, that looks like a bribe. That looks like corruption. That looks like the NYPD is in bed with organized crime. Bumpy pulled out one more document, a newspaper article already written, ready to be published. The headline read, "Police Chief Took Bribes from Harlem Kingpin, Daughter's Wedding Funded by Gambling Money." I have 3 journalists ready to run this story, Bumpy said. 1 at the Times, 1 at the Herald, 1 at the Amsterdam News. All I have to do is make 1 phone call. Kennedy stared at the article. His entire career, his reputation, his daughter's happiness, all of it could be destroyed with 1 phone call. But I didn't take bribes. I didn't know. It doesn't matter, Bumpy said. Perception is reality. You taught me that. You've arrested dozens of men based on circumstantial evidence, based on how things looked. Now I'm showing you how your situation looks. The room was silent. 30 officers watching their commissioner standing there, gun lowered, face pale, looking at a folder like it contained a death sentence. "What do you want?" Kennedy finally asked. Bumpy stood up. For the first time, he moved, walked around his desk, stood face to face with Kennedy. "I want exactly what I've always wanted, to be left alone. You take your 30 officers and you walk out of here. You destroy your case against me, you stop investigating Harlem, and I destroy these documents. And if I refuse, then I make the call. Your career ends today. Your daughter reads in the newspaper that her perfect wedding was paid for by a criminal. Your wife learns you've been lying to her. Your legacy becomes a cautionary tale about corruption." Kennedy's jaw worked. His eyes burned with rage and humiliation. But he was trapped. Bumpy had him. "You planned this for years." "Yes," Bumpy said simply, "because that's how you survive in my world. You don't wait for threats, you prepare for them." Kennedy looked at his officers. They were watching, waiting for orders. He looked back at Bumpy. "This isn't over." "Yes, it is," Bumpy said. "You just don't want to admit it." Kennedy holstered his gun, slowly. Like every movement caused him physical pain. He turned to his officers. "Stand down. We're leaving." "Sir?" One officer stepped forward. "But the warrant?" "The warrant is void," Kennedy said. "This operation is canceled." The officers looked confused. Some protested. "Commissioner, we have him. We have everything." I said, "Stand down." Kennedy's voice was sharp. "Final. This raid is over." The officers filed out, reluctantly, confused, angry. They'd prepared for months. They'd been promised the arrest of the decade. And now they were walking away with nothing. When the last officer left, Kennedy turned back to Bumpy. One more time. Just the 2 of them. "You think you're smart? You think you've won? But I know what you are. You're a criminal. A parasite. Everything you've built is based on hurting people." Bumpy didn't react, didn't argue. "Maybe you're right, Commissioner, but I'm a criminal who just beat the law. And you're a lawman who just walked away from justice. Which one of us is worse?" Kennedy left, didn't answer, couldn't answer. 3 weeks later, Stephen Kennedy announced his early retirement from the NYPD. He cited health reasons, family concerns. Nobody believed it. Everyone knew something had happened, some scandal, some failure, but the details never came out. Bumpy kept his word. He destroyed the documents. The journalists never ran their stories. But the message spread through the NYPD anyway. Bumpy Johnson had turned the biggest raid in department history into nothing. 30 cops, the commissioner himself, all of them walked away empty-handed, and the rumor was always the same. Bumpy had something, some leverage, some secret that made even the police commissioner back down. Years later, in 1965, a reporter asked Kennedy about that failed raid. Kennedy was retired by then, living in Connecticut, away from New York, away from the memories. He smiled, but it was a bitter smile. Bumpy Johnson taught me the most important lesson of my career. Power isn't about who has the bigger gun, it's about who has the better information. I thought I was hunting him, but he'd been hunting me for years, and I never even knew it, the reporter pressed. What did he have on you? Kennedy stood up. Interview over. He never spoke about Bumpy Johnson again, but people who knew Kennedy said he changed after that day, became quieter, more careful, less certain, because Bumpy Johnson had done something worse than beat him. Bumpy had shown him that everything he believed about law, order, and justice could be turned against him with one photograph in one manila folder. That's the genius of Bumpy Johnson. He didn't fight the raid with violence, didn't shoot his way out, didn't run. He'd spent years setting up the perfect defense, years investing in one police commissioner's weakness, his love for his daughter, his pride, his need to give her a perfect wedding, and when the moment came, Bumpy turned that love into a weapon. 30 guns couldn't stop Bumpy Johnson. But one photograph did what no criminal ever could. It stopped the law itself. If this story shows you what real power looks like, hit that subscribe button. Drop a like if you understand that the smartest weapon isn't in your hand, it's in your files. Share this with someone who needs to learn that information is the ultimate leverage. And in the comments, tell me, would you have taken Bumpy's deal? Would you have walked away? More legendary stories coming next. Don't miss them.